Welcome to our info session for the third Innovation in CEE competition sponsored by BOLDT company. For more information beyond what I'm going to talk about today, you could go to our website at innovationcee.wisc.edu. So in this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about what innovation means within CEE and present a few examples of innovation and also talk about some of the winners from the last two competitions and also provide you a little bit information about prizes and our what do we look for when it comes to judging this competition. So with that, okay. So this is the first of its kind of a competition that is being organized by the CEE department. This is an annual competition that supports the entrepreneurial spirit of Badger engineering and basically encourages students to think outside the box and beyond the realms of typical classroom learning. As part of this competition, we would like to provide a unique hands-on experience focused on developing new materials, technologies, solutions, all of the above within various areas of CEE that could include structural, material, water resources, environmental, transportation, geological, and construction engineering. So a key question is, what is innovation? Because this is an innovation competition. Innovation comes around whenever we'd like to make newer things or make existing things better. So it's an expression of ingenuity and initiative from humans. And also it can be a solution to a problem or a challenge. And like I mentioned, it can be a new, or we could bring about a drastic change to something that's already existing. So all of this constitutes innovation. Then the question is, what can be innovated? Well, we can have products, systems, or services. And pretty much everything falls under these three categories. And very often, innovation requires effort, cost, and more importantly, failure. So failure, I'd like to say, is the first step towards innovation. You fail and you never stop trying, and eventually you bring about innovation in due course. So the best part of this competition, I think, are the prizes. So we have first, second, and third prize of $2,500, $1,500, and $1,000. And we also have up to 5 honorable mentions. Regardless of the size of your team, the cash prize is going to be distributed evenly among all the team members. Specific criteria for eligibility could be found on our website about how many members are allowed in a team and who can participate and such information. Okay, so I'd like to talk a little bit about some examples of what each of these innovative products, services, and systems comprise. So here's an example of smart facades. So essentially, making them smart adds additional functionalities to what facades are typically used for, which is to protect a structure from exterior elements. But also, if you look at this image on the right, you can see some plants growing, which can contribute, in addition to just protecting the building, also towards carbon capture. So this is a good example of an innovative product. So an innovative solution, here's an example for that. And this is very relevant for Wisconsin because it snows a lot. And when it snows, traffic lights, there are frost that forms on the traffic lights, and we're not able to use them as intended. So an innovation that was brought about was to use certain low energy heating elements within these LED lights that can melt or defog these lights, and that way they could be used effectively. So this is a solution to an existing challenge or a problem that we often face in Wisconsin. An innovative service. A lot of times when we build structures or components, we may lose their original designs because they're so old, maybe, but we want to revive them or build upon them to make later advancements. How do we do that when we do not have a design existing for that structure? So here's an example of how we can use the scanned image or files of these structures and convert them into CAD designs so that we can then build upon them for future advancements. So this is an example of innovative service. Now, these are just one example each under each of these categories, and it's by no means exhaustive. So next, what I'd like to talk about a little is how are we going to evaluate or judge your presentations or your innovation? So there are 4 categories. One is idea, of course, very important. How novel, creative, and how important is your idea to the society? And the second is how do you implement your idea in the real world? You can have a great idea, but is it feasible to be implemented in the real world? Of course, you're not expected to implement as part of the project or the innovation itself, but a futuristic thought of how you would implement this in the real world. So that's something very important. The third is execution. Yeah, how did you go about doing your research or the projects to get to the final innovation? So that's very important. And finally is the pitch. A lot of times people have great ideas and innovation, but if you cannot present it effectively or sell your idea, then it's a lost cause. So it's very important to sell your idea in 30 minutes or less. So you'll be given a time slot and you'll be presenting your or pitching your innovation to us. So these are 4 categories that we would use for evaluating your presentations. Okay, so, oops, I think there was a lag. Okay. Next, I'd like to briefly talk about some of the winners from the past competition. The first place in 2020, the topic of their innovation was food production byproducts exploring rock salt alternatives for de-icing. Again, this is a very important problem or challenge in the state, in Midwest in general, where it snows a lot. So you must have seen rock salt being used in your neighborhoods, on the streets, for de-icing when it snows or before snowing sometimes. Often this has a lot of negative impact. One is it can deteriorate the surfaces on which they're applied. And also when there runoff of this toxic chloride into the US waterways like Lake Mendota or other water bodies, can destroy the flora and fauna in those water bodies. So in this innovation, they looked for alternatives to rock salt for de-icing purposes. They looked at coffee grounds, cheese brine, pickle brine as alternative de-icing materials. And then they evaluated the time, the traction, the time to melt, and COD concentrations, which are all very relevant for this application. So here's a time lapse of how concrete snow melted on a concrete slab when they use different materials like rock salt, brine, coffee grounds, and pickled brine. And essentially, they evaluated the impact of each of these products in terms of traction, time to melt on two materials, asphalt and concrete, how effective temperature changes, cost, and environmental impact. And they came up with their final recommendation based on these criteria that pickled brine was the most appropriate alternative to rock salt. So this won the first place last year. And this is a great example of a solution or a product. It can be either. All right. So the second place was on modular DAC system for geological and infrastructure monitoring. It's very important to monitor new and existing infrastructure. And with more and more infrastructure being built and with increasing population, we'd like to have a low cost and modular DAC system that can measure these properties, if you want to say. Towards that, and in addition, this modular DAC could also monitor environmental impacts due to climate change. So the idea is modular, so you could use this for multiple purposes. So for that, so this is what the modular DAC system looked like. So this is a product that was developed. And this is some of the wiring details of what it looks like. So essentially, this is one tool with a modular structure that can be reconfigured and used to measure multiple parameters, which could include GPS location, time-based data acquisition of different physical and chemical parameters. And more importantly, it was cost-effective and easy to use. So this is a great product innovation. So back in 2019, the first place was won by this group which worked on fungi as an alternative fertilizer. So often fertilizers that you use for lawns contain a lot of nitrogen. And again, when this runoff happens to, and runoff into the waterways can really harm the flora and fauna. And so they looked at fungi, I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce this name, so I'm just going to call it the fungi, as an alternative fertilizer, and essentially with no nitrogen in it. So what they did was they looked at how the roots of grass or lawn grows and compared the influence of the fungi as a fertilizer versus your typical nitrogen-based fertilizers, and they showed that the grass had the densest root of all the grasses that were grown using other fertilizers. So this is a great example for an alternate solution to using for nitrogen-based fertilizers. The second place was won by this team, which looked at real-time mixer for concrete construction using 3D printing. So basically, they designed a prototype. This is a product now. They designed a prototype where they could mix cement, water, and aggregates together so that they can achieve real-time printing on a print bed for 3D printing of concrete. And the third place was won by the group that looked at hail impact resistant roofing and facades. So this is again a very critical issue for Midwest states where there's a lot of hail impact and hail damage that occurs during winter. So, and so they looked at this new design where essentially which utilizes the concept of bounce back. Essentially, when you have an impact, the structure absorbs or dissipates energy, and bounces back to its original form without any permanent damage. And they achieve that using some 3D printing approach. So this is a solution and a product again for hail impact damage. So again, these were just the top picks from last 2 years, just to give you an idea of kind of the direction to think about while coming up with your own innovations. I'd like to talk a little bit about resources that are available. On campus, we have several resources that are available to enable your innovation. We have UW Makerspace, campus printing, student printing, garage physics. We have the COE student shop, and also an off-campus makerspace at Sector 67. And so these are some really good resources that you can utilize for your projects. So finally, if to learn more about eligibility info and other criteria and know more resources that are available on campus, I highly encourage you to visit our website at innovationcee.wisc.edu. And yes, so here's a brief schedule that for this competition. Very important, you have to register to participate in this competition, and that is on February 1st is the deadline for that. And we'd like to get a project update on March 8th about how your project's going. It's going to be a very short update. Again, details of that can be found on our website. We have a submission deadline for your project, which is May 11th. And the actual competition day is on May 14th. We have added a new criteria if there is somebody who's participated last year. There's a new criteria, and that's the requirement of a mentor. That could be a faculty associate, adjunct faculty, professor of practice. It could be any one of these, but you're required to have a mentor. And if you don't have one, but you have an idea, we can help you connect with a mentor as well. So please reach out to us, and we'll put you in touch with relevant mentors. And again, this competition is open to all CEE and GLE undergrads. And if you're graduating in May, you could still participate as a student in this competition. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions, please reach out to Amanda Thus at athus@wisc.edu. And again, just a reminder, please register by February 1st and check out our website at innovationcee.wisc.edu for more information. Thank you for listening.